use this blue tape is going to be distracting. Did I talk about this last week?
No.
Okay. Because when you're looking at a painting, every color affects every other color. This blue is so intense that it's going to affect all the other colors you put on your paintings subconsciously. I always
Just the contrast?
Just because of the
head.
color in the head, yeah. So if you're doing a painting that's very gray and foggy and you have that blue on it, it's going to end up in relationship to that blue even more gray, where you might want it a little blue-gray. It's a whole color theory thing where it does affect what's near it. Like if you had a red room, it's almost overwhelming. It's all red. You throw in something bright blue in that and bam, it's like spice. It's going to change the feeling of that room. The same with a painting. That's all. So I use a natural tape, which I bought at the dollar store and I'm having trouble with it coming off. It keeps ripping. So, but it's still working. Or black. There is black masking tape as well. That's just a comment about that. But
Oh, fine.
go ahead.
I see. Everybody else gets compliments on their work.
And I get the blue tape.
We're learning from you. You're teaching us, Lauren.
Don't feel singled out.
Yes. Yeah, you're not the only one with blue tape, so it's okay. It's just a comment. I mean, it's not that horrible, really. I like to make comments. Some people brought, here's a dropper. Put it away. Look, little eyedropper for wedding for paints. That's
Very good.
that's
Somebody else did that last week.
Oh, Lauren?
See, it was Lauren's idea.
Yeah, no, even has a whole bottle here with the water already in it. And water is great. Poor Lily, she's bringing her water with her, which means she has to carry this, half a pound weight, which a pound is two.
Carolyn, do you ever use these pens
Yes.
that have water in them?
Yes. They're nice. Have you tried it yet?
Yeah, just very briefly on a trip I was with a leader on a trip who actually was a watercolor artist herself, but not like you. She was a more amateur, but she carried this around and.
I use it when I use my Pentel when I'm doing in my sketchbook. I use this because this is water soluble for a while and then it becomes permanent. So I can sketch with this pen, which you can't see, and then I can take that water brush. It's a brush, but it has a cartridge for water in it, and then you can run it along the edge of that, and it will bleed it, so it becomes
Oh.
What is that? Shades of gray.
shades of gray. Yeah, it's not coming out great. Let me try again.
Is it?
So then I use it almost like watercolor, like shading. I'm going to do a close-up of some sketching. Maybe you can get a better idea. This is my favorite little tree. I normally start with my 3 pen. This is my 3, the green one is my 8, and here's my water brush. So I'll start with a 3 pen just because it's smaller and it gives a tip, and it's not as dark. So I indicate where the tree trunk is going. This is a little tree I love to paint. Give the gesture. The gesture is the feeling, the flow of the little tree, because he's not a perfect little Christmas tree. I want him to have character. So here I'll bring it in and out, and I get that shape. Comes up here. I'm looking at the basic shapes, no details, nothing at this point, and get the feeling of that flow. That's pretty much where he is. Then I can come in with a darker one and start putting in dark areas. These are areas under the branches. And notice I'm always drawing so that the branches are heading out and in the natural form of their growth. But underneath is where the sun can't get, and it has those darker little branches. The strength of the trunk. And I try to keep it a little angular. It just makes it a little more interesting in my sketch here. Little light there, little darkness there. And I'm doing this quickly. Often I would take more time if I were doing, kind of a more preparatory sketch. But this is so you can get the idea. Now I'm switching back to some light marks again on the lighter side of these branches to indicate some places massing the areas together, and in other areas these are little broken branches coming off, and in other areas I indicate some individual. So you're going from mass to individuals to dark to light, where the trunk goes into the ground. Now I look at the design. I want a little more dark all over. Here's the shadow under there. It's being cast. The light is coming from this direction. I've been keeping that in mind all along. Now if I want, I have a nice pen and ink sketch here, but I can take my water brush and bleed. Watch how this bleeds as I come across. I just run some water there. It will pick up a little of the ink on the tip of the brush, and I'm laying it flatter along the side like a watercolor brush, so it will pick up some of those. As I come up in here, I'm trying to keep natural marks going with my pen. Notice the relaxed way I'm doing it. Sometimes I press further down on the brush to get more of the width of it, so it's darker, and other times I go up to the tip of the brush. See how small I can get, or I can get really wide. And that way I have control over variety within the sketch. Again, constantly thinking about the flow, the growth of this tree, keeping it loose, keeping it fun, keeping it expressive. Clean it off down here, throw in some light there. So just real quickly, there's that little tree, and as it dries, if I want, I can come back in with some more detail while it's wet, or I can come in a little later when it's drier and mark it in there. So that's kind of fun. Just so you can see a close-up of how I use my drawing instruments.
Is it always great?
Yeah,
But it will also
yeah.
work with your paint. You can put a line of paint along there and then run the water brush, or a clean brush.
And what pen are you using for
Oh, I
that?
like it.
This is a Stadler Pentel Hybrid Technica. And they come in different thicknesses. But I have found in my sketchbook, because graphite and charcoal in a sketchbook will smudge. And this doesn't. So, and I was going to go out and get my sketchbook. I forgot.
Will you,
Stadler Pentel.
we can put that in the newsletter,
Yes.
or what, I'm sorry, the class. Oh, of course, it will be on the tape now.
Stadler Pantone, what is it?
Yeah,
say
but-
name? Water something?
Nope. It's Technica. I'm looking for another one. And I get two thicknesses. I'll hand it around.
Thank you.
Oh, please, I want them back.
Hybrid.
They come in different thicknesses. So I get like a 3 and an 8. And that one is for very thin lines, and one is thicker, and the 8 obviously is a bigger nib on it, and it puts down more ink. But then after a while, this will dry, and a week or so later, it won't move around as much. But and some of these water pens, some are better quality than others. I bought a set that was not good. And
Can you tell if that's any good?
no, I can't until I
Can't tell?
use them.
You can't tell her it's not good.
I don't know.
Oh, got it. Okay.
I can't tell if it's not good
What brands? Do you know that it is?
because I bought those other ones and they didn't work well. So.
Oh, so whatever you work, whatever you got.
I wouldn't know enough to know.
Was not as good. I mean,
Anyone else want to see this, or will you pass it around?
I think they're good for quick sketches, but they're not good for real work.
No, but that's the
That's
one
the
she
pen
draws
she-
with.
I mean,
and
it
then
could
she
work. It
smudges
could
it.
work.
Okay, so this one is the,
That is much.
Where's my brush? Oh, it's in my hand.
this
It
one.
may have dried before you.
I'm sorry for keeping interrupting.
No, no.
This is the Pencil Arts hybrid. This is the one that you can draw with, and then you.
Then draw with, and then you take your water brush. And the reason with the water brush, it's just convenient. You don't have to have a tub of water with you because it has that cartridge inside it. And I was going to get my sketchbook. I'm going to sketchbook. I'm making notes so I don't forget, because I forget.
This way.
Arts hybrid.
And they have those down at Cheap Joe or online.
I have a question.
Yes.
What pencil do you use if you're going to draw your painting out first?
You mean if I, on the actual paper?
Yeah.
I use an H. I'm looking for one.
What number? Then
HB I use a hard one. 8 HB is good. 2F would be good.
You said H.
I don't use this. This I use for sketching, but I don't use this when I'm laying out my watercolor because it's so soft. You want a hard pencil.
so mechanical pencil.
Mechanical would be good. Just be careful with your pencil that you're not pressing down enough that it actually microscopically dents your paper. Because a harder pencil will put a dent in the paper, a little trowel, and then your paint will settle into that.
Yeah.
So you want to use a very, very whisper touch on that. And
It's like a 4B, a good one?
not a B. Head over the other way. Head toward the
H's.
H's, yes.
There's one that my cat ate. It's an H.
But you said HB is.
HB is good.
Okay.
What did I say?
And does the pencil show when you're done?
A little bit. You
Does
can.
it mush with the paint?
No, doesn't move. Or graphite doesn't move. Once you're done and your painting is totally dry, you could take a light eraser and lift some of that pencil if you wanted to. But if you look at your master painters, they don't. It
I like
shows
that.
it shows the progress of creation when you can see those under drawings, even if they're not perfect.
I love kneaded erasers, and if I've got a pencil that's too dark,
Yep, you can just barely touch it. Some paint will lift with an eraser, so you have to be careful with that,
I
and
usually
some
do it
doesn't.
before I paint, so I still have some pencil, but it's not,
Okay.
it won't smudge.
And if you erase on the paper, it's going to change the texture of the paper. So if you do erase in one little spot, and then you put a wash over it, that spot is going to be different. You know, it's very subtle, but it will be different. I take down some paper this morning. This is just this one, just some Canson watercolor. Nothing super duper. I took a wet, clean sponge and I wiped this paper because you can feel, we talked last week about a sizing on the paper. It's like almost like starch they put on the paper. And I don't like that. So I take it off. Some people like it, you can leave it on, or I just take it off by taping down my paper, giving it a wipe with a clean sponge and letting it
What
dry.
makes the difference here in taking, if you take the sizing off, what's the difference?
The difference is that the paper will and the paint will have more direct contact.
Okay.
It's a good question because I don't know what the sizing is made out of, but it creates this barrier, a little bit of a barrier between the water and, the paper and the color.
Is it harder to lift?
No, it would be easier to lift with the sizing on there.
With the sizing.
Right.
And do all papers have that?
Your handmade papers do not have that. Remember I passed around last week, you could tell the texture. You can, on one of these papers, if you feel it, you can almost feel the sizing. It's a smoothness to it.
It's called sizing,
Sizing.
like starch.
Yep.
Sizing. So do you always paint on dry paper, or you don't do the wet?
Depends on what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah. I know I need to do more. I've been so focused on pastels lately. I haven't done a lot of demos. I'm actually watercolor painting. But today, I shall try to do some of that.
Okay. I wanna
You
ask
guys didn't get to
this-
paint much last week either. I'm sorry about that. Yes.
I just wanna ask one, ignorant question about colors. Like,
No
I got-
ignorant questions.
I got this, and we've been talking about colors by specific names that I'm not familiar with, like cadmium and this and that.
Yeah.
And so, and this doesn't have any name labels
No.
on it, and it's a much broader array. So my question is, like,
Like a cool yellow and a warm yellow. You can kind of see that.
I can see that, I just don't, it's just the names that you're using, I can't correspond, and I don't know, and it probably doesn't work on the names, like, how important are the specific names?
That's part of my training, and that's why I kind of do that, and I apologize.
No, I just don't know whether I'm gonna confuse
But this is
myself.
not
I love that.
a hue. When I'm saying cadmium or lemon yellow, things like that, those are hue colors, the pure color that it comes from.
I looked
You
earlier.
can see that this is mixed with white already,
Uh-huh.
so it's not a pure
I'm
hue.
sorry.
I wouldn't worry about it too much.
So like these charts of mixing and stuff, I don't even know what to do mixing with this, because I'm not, I'm not starting with the basics, so.
Start with I'm gonna hold this up so that you can see. So whenever you're mixing, I start with my yellows because it's the lightest, so I start with my cool yellow, right? Do a chart around that, do orange, do different reds. These are not exact colors either because they're print, but
About 2 by.
kind of go around that way. So down the side, the yellows to the blues.
Okay, and don't worry about the names.
Not so much. If I mention it, I'm sorry. If I mention it, ask me if it's not clear, please.
Okay.
Like, when you say this, what do you mean? And I'll come over and try to show you the closest color.
Okay.
That's what pastels do. Pastels don't have names.
Do they have numbers?
They have numbers. But when it gets into my palette, I don't care about the number. I'm like, this is a grayish, cool yellow
That you like.
that I like. Yeah. But I know it's in the lemon yellow family because I've been trained with pure pigments.
Got it. Okay.
Good question. All right. So let's try playing around here. Dum, da, dum, da, dum. How long was that? I have no idea. Concept of time here. 10:30 already. That's all right. Good questions. This shows you're learning, and I like that you guys are going right ahead and painting. Water. The importance of how much water to use when you are painting. That's one of the very first things. And I've kind of neglected talking about that. I've written down when your paint is very, very wet. So if you pick up some water, choose a color. I don't know why I go with that color all the time. I'm going to go with green because I just don't really want this on my palette. So I want to use it up. So you work the paint. Remember, it's damp. If it starts to dry, take your spritzer, keep the surface of your paints damp, not super soaked, and then put some paint on your palette. Is that in your way? That's in your way.
That's helpful, thank you.
You can kind of push it out that way. And you're right, when you're mixing color, Emily mentioned having 2 brushes, which will go along faster, or you're cleaning your brushes all the time. So at this point, I have pulled out a good amount of pigment, and the pigment is the color. Am I going to do that on here? Yeah, I guess I am. So if I take it this way and I lay it onto my paper, it's pretty thick. I've got a good amount of pigment there. And at this point, it's wet. So if I tilt my head and I get the light onto it, I can see it's very shiny. So that's glossy wet paint.
Excuse me.
And yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry, thank you.
And the teacup.
That's why.
Oh, that's right. Another one.
No, this is my ticket. I'm glad I have
Thank
all
you.
these things around here. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
A lot of our techniques depend on what stage of wetness your paint is. So if you're going to do a wet in wet and you really want it to spread out, this is the time to do it, when your paint is glossy wet. It's not enough. And I always do it, you pull it out of here. You want to keep your pigments in your palette clean. So you pull it out to your mixing area. You don't usually go right from that into color because you're apt to contaminate your colors, especially your light yellow. It's so sensitive.
Are you when you say pulling out, are you getting just trying to get the paint off your brush?
I'm pulling some out of my well here and bringing it over here.
Oh, okay, before you've mixed.
Yeah, and this does a number of things. It sees how thick the paint is that I have here. If there's any particles, I want those usually dissolved, because if we let these dry out, sometimes it clumps up in little tiny particles. And how wet it is, so now whether I can use it or not. And I'm not mixing here, I'm going to mix. See, already this part is drier, there wasn't as much. So I could lay some color right across there, and then it's going to bleed out. Decide which is your dirty water and which is your clean water so you're consistent. Okay. So I'm getting this heavy bleed on that because it's wet in wet. I'm going to do a number of these. See, I don't know if you could see that. There was a particle there and it's leaving a line. I don't know where that particle came from. So now I'm trying to mix it on the paper, which is awkward.
So what you did with your first square, were you just trying to put some highlights in there?
No, I just dropped in some bright color and it's bleeding. See how it's moving around where it was very wet? It's really moving. That was probably not the best color to use, but it really bled out. And that would be great for if you're doing landscapes or different things. Wow, these are drying fast. They dry so fast. If you're out painting plein air on a very humid day, it will not dry fast. The next one, when it starts to lose, it's not super wet, but you can start seeing the texture of the paper, and that's kind of, I'm going to call that the sheen level, and I'm going to use a different color here. So by going into that, it's not going to bleed as much because it's not as wet. This is a good stage where you might want to take a damp brush and twist to lift color. And of course I put green down, which does not lift well. Show you in a moment. So I'm taking the damp brush, bringing it across and twisting it. So the reason I'm twisting is it picks up paint on one side, and if I twist it as I go along, the next side will be cleaner and it picks up. So you see I lifted that because it was at a stage where that would work. You can do that sometimes on dry as well, but the sheen stage is a good spot for doing that. Yes.
Do you use a wet brush when you're doing that?
Yes, it's a damp brush, damp clean brush. So I dip it in my water.
Yeah.
I get most of the water off on the edge of my cup. I touch it to my sponge on the fat part of the brush to help dry it a bit so it's damp, so it will absorb. If your brush is dry, it's not going to absorb. It's like a sponge. We talked about this last week, I think, right? It needs to be a little damp. The next phase is your matte phase, and this is dried a lot already. This is probably a good stage for some of your techniques, like this is alcohol. Let's see if I can do this without messing up my other examples. Yeah, you can see part of it was fairly dry. And you can do this with water or with alcohol. It does a different effect, but see how it resists.
What did you do with that?
This one, I just sprayed alcohol on it.
Sprayed alcohol.
That's alcohol, but water will do it, but it will look a little different. So you can experiment with a spray bottle of,
That's all you did there, spray the alcohol.
yeah.
That's
And
very
see,
cool.
it's
Oh, I like it.
getting some nice textures. I shouldn't use this green, the green's not working as well, but
That's the alcohol.
that's the alcohol. But if I did that spray water or alcohol when the paint was still very wet, it would not do that.
That's cool.
Let me do an example of that. Is this good as you guys are going and trying things out?
Paint, so you sprayed it on paint that had passed the wet, the really
Yeah,
glossy.
it was
had
kind of
passed
into the
glossy.
matte. It was past glossy. I know a lot of, I'm realizing that some of these fundamentals, I had jumped into them before without. So here's wet, wet. I've got a blue and I lay it down quickly and it's quite, I'm gonna lay down another one too beside it. This might be a better example. All right, so these are both wet. If I cover one, I'll do it with water this time. I check it off to the side. That way you can see if it's got a nice dribbly spray or not. And I spray it onto there. You don't want to do it too much because if you spray, it won't. That creates an effect. But as this dries, it'll change. Oh, that didn't work. That was not my good experiment.
That should make you crazy when it happens.
Yeah, it's like, wait a minute, this is not showing what I wanted to show. Okay, I think it dried so quickly. So here's wet, wet. Trying to keep that really wet. And then if I spray into that, a lot. And then I'm get this one, I'm gonna do this one here. That's not resisting very well. I think that one dried too much. But you can see here it was partially dry when I sprayed the water on. Here, I did the same thing here, but this was so wet, it just didn't do anything.
Got it.
So the timing on these two effects, here you can see it was a little drier here, so it kind of worked right there. And this one was too dry, so it didn't do much of anything. It's a more subtle effect.
Which is the alcohol.
Well, this was the alcohol, but it was too dry at this point. So this was when it was partially dry, and this was what I did the same thing here. I did here with the water, but this was so wet, it just put more water into it. It didn't speckle it. It didn't speckle it if I wanted that speckle.
That's a speckle. That's a speckle.
This, because this was drier, but see up here where it was still so wet,
It didn't speckle.
it didn't speckle. That the effect with salt has to have the right timing. It needs to be between the sheen and just going into the matte.
That's a whole lot harder.
That's very tricky.
The salt,
The salt. I
and
mean,
it dissolves, and you gotta be sure not to have too much.
well, if I put salt here, let me do another here. See if this works. I do these demos and I usually just hope that they work all right. So if I put the salt in this green one that's still so wet, or I put it into this one that's partially, now I have to wait for it to dry to see the effect. But in the wet, wet, it's not going to create the effect you're looking for. It's just going to suck up some of the water and just not go anywhere too far. Where if it's drier, and then some pigments work differently than other pigments. This pigment is not doing what it's supposed to do. So I'm going to pick up this one. And you can try these effects with different pigments because each one will react differently to the effect you're doing. Pigments, as I said, come from different sources. And I'll speak about tradition here. Wow, it's drying fast. For instance, yellow ochre, any of your earth tones come from dirt that's been ground very, very fine, or silt, which is just the tiniest particles of that. Ultramarine blue historically came from lapis lazuli, that they would grind up that stone to get that blue. I think alizarin crimson, not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, but there's a bug that the shell of it creates that color, and they grind it up to use that. The beetle, some sort of beetle. And I used to know the name of it. But it does also create. So because all of the microscopic particles that are in our pigments, each one is going to act differently. And the best way to learn what they're going to do is just to do it. You just play around with it and keep playing till you see. You'll see that some settle out very nicely. Settle out means, I don't have a good textured paper here. I'm seeing no examples right off the bat. But some of the particles, like your earth tones, will, let me back up. If I mix something like an ultramarine blue, which is a transparent and lays very thin on the paper, very glazingly, and you mix that with a little bit of your yellow ochre, which is that earth tone yellow, this one more like this. It's an earth tone yellow, which the particles are more like dirt. The ultramarine blue will smooth out on the paper, and I'm talking really microscopically, and the yellow ochre, if it has any texture on your paper, will kind of settle into those little grooves. So that's settling out, and it creates a very subtle, beautiful texture.
You mean the paint itself
itself.
is going to separate
Slightly, very
with
subtly.
with the salt or the spray.
With the salt or the spray, or depending which two colors you mix. Those transparent colors, I gave you the chart that had the T beside them, they're going to remain more uniform as they spread across the paper. Where your opaque colors, the particles are kind of going to separate themselves a little bit. And that can be great effects. So, oh, this is working now. All right, in this green, this neutral red, and this, I dropped salt into each of these. You can see I dropped salt into, it was so wet, didn't do anything. This and this one are having very different effects. And notice how the salt looks a little bit different than the water sprayed on it.
Yeah.
Yes. Very subtle. So this had salt on it, too wet. These were better timed. This is water and this is salt.
I like salt.
So, this is water? What?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
the
you
spray.
put water?
That was the spray of the water.
Yeah, the spray of the water on the salt.
Nope, there was no salt on this one.
Just spraying water.
I did a flat wash of the blue and I just sprayed some water into
Oh.
that. And that's softer. This tends to have sharper edges.
And that's
the
what the
salt.
salt. I
That's the
see.
salt, yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize you sprayed water. Okay.
Yeah. Now the salt's still on here and I had to wait for it to be totally dry before I brushed that off. You're good, yes?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. So, too wet to do anything with water or salt. Here's salt, here's water.
This is salt too?
This is salt and this is salt.
Okay.
I didn't think this one was going to work, but it took longer to work than the blue one did because it's a different pigment.
Salt.
Water.
Water.
Salt.
Salt.
Cool.
Yeah. And you can't really combine them because if you spray this with water and it starts, by the time you want to get the salt on there, that period of the wetness of the paint is going to have gone by for the salt. So you kind of have to choose on those, one or the other, because they both need to be applied about at the same time.
And the separation of the two opaque colors, you need to apply either water or salt for that to occur. That you said they slightly separate
If
two
you,
opaque colors.
no, like this red here is kind of a transparent red. I mixed it, it had something else in it, but see right in this area how it's settled out a little bit?
you can see a little darkness.
Uh-huh.
That's a settling.
And you didn't spray, that wasn't caused by spray?
No, that
It
was
just
just the
settling.
paints I had on the brush.
Got it,
Yeah.
okay, all right, the 2 paints.
So do you brush the salt off after?
When it's totally dry, you brush the salt off very lightly.
Is it possible for paper to have some resist?
Yes.
I'm getting blotchy.
Yep.
Yeah, I just thought some too.
I looked at, when I walked by, I looked at this paper and I'm like, this is gonna be a little tricky. It has
Yeah.
such a texture to it.
I know.
Is that a watercolor
It's
paper?
That's it.
I just picked up some Canson multimedia dry thing this weekend.
Oh, yeah, I have some
Feel
of
the
that
back,
too.
did you try the backside next time?
I was wondering if I could use the backside.
It has a very mechanical
Mm-hmm.
texture on her, which means on hers, it presses across. They use an iron type thing. Watch with your paper towels that you use as well.
Oh, yeah.
If you blot. Remember I showed, I think last week, you can get some cloud things. But with this paper towel, look at the mechanical
Oh, yes.
texture on there.
And that comes from the, what's on the paper towel.
It's the paper towel, which you might want that. Usually you don't, because it doesn't look, if you're doing a landscape, it doesn't have a natural look to it. If you were doing lattice work, right? Got a paint and you put the green down there and then you press it once with a paper towel like this, it would look like lattice work.
Oh,
I don't know why I say
interesting.
lattice work, it's just lattice, right? Probably some New England term.
It's interesting. So you could actually use it if you want that texture.
If you wanted this texture, this paper towel would have left that texture.
Oh.
So you could just buy different paper
And
towels.
that's the texture of the paper coming out.
That's the texture of this. See
Oh,
it on
of
there?
that, oh.
And I just pressed it there. Let me press again.
I see.
See how it
Okay.
picked it up on the paper towel?
Yes.
So where it didn't touch, it leaves that. Viva has no texture. Just to let you know. But sometimes you want the texture, or like all those other paper towels I had, which aren't here. So, really paying attention as to how wet your paint is, how dry it is, those in-between stages are going to help you in a lot in what you do with the paint. If you're going along and you are doing a brush stroke, let's see. I haven't even talked brush strokes yet. Don't let me get too far. 11 o'clock, let me talk about brush strokes. Okay.
10 minutes.
Let's paint. All right, now if I want two colors to bleed that are juxtaposed to each other, to bleed together, and I do one brush stroke there, and then I pick up the other paint and drag it beside it. Where it touches, it's going to bleed together and create a third color. So if you don't want them to bleed together, but you want to paint while it's still wet, you have to leave a very thin line of white between. Otherwise, they're going to bleed together.
Tell us again about how you determine which colors are juxtaposed.
I just chose two colors.
Oh, look at this.
I didn't
This one
Yeah,
blends
see?
together like plants.
This is pretty too.
I have a very, very basic question.
And you can see in this one, interesting that I lay down the blue first, but the red seems to be going more into the
bled
blue
into
than the
it.
blue into the red.
The bled up.
I have a basic question. I am not sure how much paint I need to put on my brush. Like how,
Okay, good question.
I'm actually having that trouble too.
We're talking about wetness here. Let's talk about how much paint goes into your brush. It depends on the look you want. Don't you love me?
Yeah.
I just love me. It depends.
if I had kind of started out with the green, so I had started out with the green. If you mix a good amount on your palette,
So let me see what, if that's okay, I'd like to see what the palette looks like when you have it all on there. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's, yeah,
so
so
I'm
it's,
picking this and
yeah.
I'm working it here to make sure these particles are pretty much dissolved
right,
before I come over here.
okay, so there's
So I
quite
can
a
see
bit,
already
yeah.
there's a good amount of pigment in there
Okay.
that I can use. You know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
can look how thick
Oh,
it
yeah,
is
you
on
have a
there.
lot there, okay.
So it's a good amount. And I can lay this down. Oh, I'm sorry.
So, oh yeah, that's a lot more than what I.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I need more.
So if I use this, and I'm just gonna touch the corner of my brush to pick up a little more water. It's getting a little dry. So I didn't dip my whole brush in. I just touched the very corner of that to absorb. And through osmosis, the water will get absorbed into the brush. So that just wets it a little more. It's still thick. And I can lay that down. So it's still pretty thick. This is a nice transparent green. If I want it to be lighter, I'm going to clean my brush. I can see there's paint in there. I can see the paint in there.
What colors did you combine to get that green that you've got there?
It was just a green I had on my palette.
So to get that, if I wanted to get that, what would you?
Can
Yeah, you have to play with your colors.
yeah, I mean that's pretty close. I would use that. So now I've got a wet clean brush. I can put some water down. Let me do this for the video. Water down here on my palette. And then I can kind of just, the edge of that brush, I'll just brush that thicker paint. And that, see how I can just pull it a little bit at a time, until I figure out how thick do I want this now. And you don't want to spend too long at this because it will dull the color over time. And then let's see it's thinner on the paper. Here. This is a little bit watered down. But on my palette, I can control
Yeah, that's a big one.
how much paint and water combination there is. I'm running out of room right now, so I'm just gonna lift this up a little bit.
So how do you prevent getting
Just leave
a strong color and then it gets really weak? You know, like this, you know.
You have to really load your brush.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not loading it enough. Okay, good.
So now I'm gonna add, I want an even lighter color. I put water on my palette. I pull out a little more of that green until in this area it looks about the thickness that I want. I try to make it uniform, and then I can lay it on the paper and I have a nice light green. But by pulling it out, you have control over how much you're using and how much you're mixing in with water. And that's how we lighten our colors, it's just adding more water. Does that make sense? See, even with a big palette, you run out of mixing room after a while. Which is why I have this cover, which is nice. I did see a Tom Lynch palette at Cheap Joe's, I think.
Recently?
Yeah, well, within the last couple of weeks.
Oh, okay, it's called Tom Lynch.
Tom Lynch.
And which is that?
I happen as I've tried over the years a number of palettes. As I said, my first one had little boxes all the way around here. And I've simplified the palette.
Yeah.
Because this green that I've just made, I can mix one of the blues and one of the yellows and get that exact same green. So why have that on my palette except convenience?
I was reading about ceramic versus plastic mixing palettes. Have you found much of a difference between the two? You said that ceramic's supposed to be superior. I don't know.
It's heavier.
Yeah.
I have. The problem though with
You found, yeah, but I do have another comment, but go ahead.
the plastic, the water and the color just kind of just wander around and
Wanders
then
around.
it like disappears.
Oh,
But
Yeah.
when I do it on ceramic,
Yeah.
on ceramic, it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it kind of does this puddling up, but if you notice, it's not really happening on mine. And the part of this reason is I've had this for 30 years. But the particles in the paint over time will kind of sand down your
kinda
surface
seal
just
it,
slightly.
I wonder if you could scratch the plastic.
We were talking about that earlier, is just take some table salt, very lightly, and a sponge, and lightly sand it down. Table salt is not that gritty that it's gonna hurt your palette, but it will take away some of that resist. I think if I mixed over here, I'm sure I'd get more of a resist than I do on this. And it's the same exact. Yeah, it kind of pulls away from itself almost.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what's happening to us.
Yeah. So yeah, try.
But in the Chinette plate that I was
How is that
using,
working? Yeah.
It wasn't. I see all the particles. I was
Man?
I was getting particles everywhere from it.
This is too absorbent almost then, right?
Yeah, I was picking up the.
But look at the
paper.
settling happening here.
Yeah.
Do you see how the yellow and the blue are kind of separating from each other?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Really. So this is acting more like paper than
Right.
It
a
is.
mixing surface. I'm sorry, because I suggested that.
That's
Thank
okay. I had no paper plates in the house, so now I do. So
So sometimes you want that variegation in your wash.
every time I give
separation.
somebody some muffins or something, I'm
Yeah.
weighing my dishes.
There you
back, I have
go.
no paper plates.
That's not a.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Which obviously, there's some of that separation.
Me to work tiny.
I'm looking at my fingernail now because it's going to be in this. Mine are very weak. I've got this gel stuff on here now just to try to hold my
It just
fingernails
kills your
together.
nails.
Well, I get it off carefully, but yeah. But mine are just deteriorating. My toenails are great. I mean, I take, biotin and gelatin and stuff. Strong toenails, but it doesn't go to the fingers.
And eventually,
How does that happen?
I drank the liquid collagen, and mine finally went to my nails.
Did it? Liquid
Yeah.
collagen.
I do
Yeah,
too.
like that.
With
what's it called?
peptides, there's collagen.
Yeah, collagen
You want the
peptides.
grass-fed, organic with peptides.
Yes,
Liquid? Say that again?
It's a powder and you mix it.
vital proteins. Is
Yes,
the one I
that's
use.
it, you
Yeah,
got it.
vital proteins.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You mix
just
it.
poured my tea in the morning.
Does it help your hair too, where it's getting thin?
It does help hair growth.
Okay,
It really
collagen,
does.
vital proteins.
It's called vital proteins, and it's a
I mix it
collagen
with water.
peptide.
Put my vitamin D
And it-
drops.
You
I
can
would
get it in
make it
either
drink to
bovine,
refresh with.
cow, or it comes in marine. I use the marine one.
Right, which is more organic, right?
Wants to
The
be
trick
more-
with our bovines here in the United States is that they're fed on food that's not natural to them.
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, well, that's why you want the grass-fed.
Exactly.
Vital proteins.
This is, we talk about, when I was working at Biltmore in the winery, we talked about the French paradox.
That's where I've met you before.
Oh, really?
I knew I met you somewhere.
I used to love it. The winery?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I loved having you.
Oh,
I
thank
need
you.
to-
Did I do a program or something?
You didn't you?
I used to do pourings and
You
tours
did
and
it was like 2 years ago.
pre-COVID. I haven't been back since
Yeah, we're
COVID.
back in this.
No, because I'm doing this now full time. But we talked about the French paradox and why is it that French seem to be able to eat all these high fatty foods, everything's made with butter, which is wonderful, and they don't put on weight like Americans. And of course, in a winery, you talk about the fact that red wine has these, and it helps to keep you slim. No, it's that most of our food is processed. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Well, isn't it also portion size? Americans
Oh no, the French can still eat it good.
really?
Yeah, I mean I've been
they
over
ate
there.
very little, but it was very rich.
It's rich, but it's not. They don't process over there. McDonald's is not red and yellow. Their theme colors. It's yellow and green, and it's called bio. It's it's organic.
Oh,
Because the French will not. I took my students over there and I said, you can't go to McDonald's, you can't go to Starbucks, you have to do local stuff. Sure enough, they go to McDonald's, of course, on the Champs-Élysées, they just did it. Guess what, Doobie? They called me Doobie because they couldn't do my last name. It just came out Doobie. Guess what they serve in McDonald's chicken McNuggets? Chunks of chicken.
Real chicken.
Real chicken.
Imagine that.
Because the French will not put up with
Yeah,
this.
they won't put up with it.
Yeah, a lot of Europe won't. It's.
It's the way we used to eat before.
It's the
French,
way, yes,
It's the way I ate growing up.
exactly.
People
And
were
since-
thinner then.
I walk down aisle, I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent here, but aisles and aisles and aisles of the grocery store, and I just walk by them. Process.
I'm always in amazement how much crap there is.
And then you see people,
And
their whole
they're
carts
buying
are just filled with this crap, and I'm thinking, oh, you poor dear. All right, sorry. I'm getting some cool textures on some of these. How are you doing? All right. So we have talked about the wetness of the paint and how that affects what you do and some of the different techniques and the paint itself. Also about how mixing how much water with your paint and how to do that on the palette. Start with a good chunk of, thick paint, consistent, and then add water off to the side and pull the paint out. Am I on time? Did you just look at
11:01. Just so
Look
you
at me. So some of the techniques, we were good with those. I think we played with those last week, the lifting and the dragging. Anything you had questions on there? Because my next step is brush strokes. Anybody need to change the water? I'd get my high school students painting once they got going off on their own. And I would just walk around the room and change their water for them. Too dirty. Because after this, all right, so we'll need some paint. The first thing you'll need, let's see what our flat brushes would do. This is a flat wash brush. And if we turn it sideways, it should have a nice chisel tip if it's wet. Right? Looking good. Some of us have these with the beveled tip on it, which are good for scraping, removing color that way. Two things that does. Let me do it while I'm here, because then I'm going into strokes. Again, it depends on the wetness of the paint, this one particular technique. Just pick up some more paint. I don't have enough pigment here. But if I take this bevel at one point and drag it through the paint, it is going to basically scratch the surface of the paper and the paint will settle into that and you'll end up with a darker line. If I wait a little while, some people actually use hair dryers on them. I just as soon have it dry naturally, which is why I'd have 3 or 4 paintings going at the same time. Again, we wait for the sheen to kind of pass. It's not going fast enough. Do we talk about a little color wheel? These are nice to have on hand. But I did send you a picture of one. Yeah.
Would you mind moving your blue bottles?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. It's a little tricky for me to see. Thank you.
I know it's hard set up here. All right, so this should be a little drier. I'm going to try it. Check my sheen, and it might. Yep.
So you do want a little sheen there.
It's not totally dry yet, but you can see at the different times when I scraped it when it was still very wet and when it was partially dry, just the same stroke that I did of dragging this across, or anything that's kind of hard and sharp, will either create darker lines because the paint settles in, or creates these light lines because I'm pushing the paint away.
The light lines are when it's drier.
It's drier, so when you scrape it, it pushes the paint, it parts the Red Sea, it pushes it out, and then because it's dry enough, it'll stay put there. And it also creates a nice little dark edge on that. So that's nice for stems of flowers sometimes, and this gets very complex. like, okay, you're painting a flower and you want this nice light stroke of the stem, so the background has to be wet but not too wet, and then you have to scratch it, and then it takes a lot of planning. But watercolor is fun. I mean, you play with it. It's got its own mind to a point. It wants to play with you. Not totally.
It wants to drive you crazy.
But sometimes it does it. Who came up with that last week? It's the cat of medium.
Yes.
Was it? Who said that?
I think it was me.
Was it? I love that. All right. What can we do with a flat brush? We get some good amount of paint into our palette, so we have something to work with. I'm just humidifying my palette here. I'm going to get 2 colors, so I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to pull this quite dry. Work the paint and get some onto the palette. So now I have a good amount of this almost alizarin purpley red, and I have a good amount of my ultramarine blue. Brush strokes. This brush, nice flat brush, if I pull it straight across, I get a nice stroke. Now it's going to lighten as it goes across, but it's wet enough on one side, I could tilt the paper. Or the other way to do that, to make it more consistent, is come in the other direction with a lighter touch. Notice how I brace my hands.
Can you say that again?
Because you're coming in at 2 directions, this is going to be more solid than just holding one hand. So I just brushed it one way and the other.
Okay.
But not too much. The more we do it, it actually dulls the color. It takes the particles and it presses them down. They lie flatter. And you want them a little bit, and this is microscopically, a little bit of an angle so that they're refracting the light that's coming at them. The other thing we can do with this wash brush is tilt it on its edge. It's very versatile. Okay, our natural way of drawing is this. This is not natural. Did we talk about this? I talk about this in drawing. The physiology of our, that's not the word I want, of our bodies, there's certain fulcrums here, you know, the wrist, this. So these strokes are very natural for us to do. This is not. This is very awkward. So if we need a curve this way, that's easy. If we need a curve this way, what are we going to do? Turn the paper upside down. Then you get this curve, and then you get this curve, and you get the same curve going the other way, which is nice when you have this. You can't do that so much at an easel. I do, because I clip on my boards and I can turn them around. But so I'm going to do a nice thin line using the, what did I call that before? The wedge, not the wedge, the chisel part, and try to run it. So I'm see how I'm moving my body so I can use this natural stroke. Very light touch right up on the tip, because if I start with a light touch and I press, it's going to get fatter. So with brush strokes, it really depends on if you're up on the tip or if you're pressing down and back up on the tip. With your flat brush, you can also twist it. Start up on the tip, turn it sideways so it's wide, turn it back so it's thin. Again, probably 90% of my paintings are these 2 brushes. My flat wash brush and my round.
And what size is your round? A 10, did you say?
I think this is a 10.
10, okay.
So you see how much you can do with just that one brush. I did the double load last week, didn't I?
The double load?
Yeah, another cool thing you can do with a flat brush, I'll do it. So I'm starting with fairly clean. Got a lot of paint in there. Okay. So I clean it, wipe it off, clean water. I'm going to take one corner of the brush and load it with one color paint and the other with the other.
Oh, interesting.
So you pick up one, just the tip of that corner, get a good amount in there, come over to this other paint where there's not enough, so I'm gonna cheat and go here. So I have blue in one corner and red in the other, and now as I come across with a stroke, I can twist it and flip it over. And we have
That's cool.
ribbon candy.
What would you?
I don't know. I wouldn't do the
Cool.
I wouldn't do the twist so much, but double loading, I mean, you could do some really nice things. If one side is more, like if it's a petal and it's a shadow, see, I can twist the brush in the half circle and it creates,
Oh, I see.
you try that again, that did not come out very well. Too dry. You can see your brush when it's too dry. If the bristles start to split, just tip the corner. Again, you don't have to dip the whole thing in. You can just touch the corner and a little bit of water will disperse through the paint. The brush, not the paint. So I've got kind of a blue flower that's coming out of growing in the green. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna go this way. And these are petals. You know, so you could do something like that with it.
So that again?
It's very wet right now. So I have blue on one side and green on the other tip of my brush.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little dry right now. By twisting, see? So I get those two colors in there.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. This, if I need to draw a fence post or something and a lot of straight little lines, this is the brush I use. Instead of trying to, even with the rigger brush, this is the rigger brush, this tiny thin one. Those are for like very light lines up on the tip for sailboat rigging or something. If you have a limited size like a fence post, this brush is perfect for it. Too wet. So if it's too wet, I don't dry the whole brush. I touch the fatter part of the brush to the sponge. See how I'm doing that? Not the tip of it. So now the tip holds the paint, but I'm removing a little bit of the water by doing that. So, and then you can just tap your brush along. And then you have nice little lines, like fence posts. And all I did here is I just tapped.
Oh.
So that's a nice easy little trick. Because if you need thicker ones, you can tap and then drag it just a touch. I don't know what that's going to be, but stairs or something. Look how pretty!
I'm a color junkie.
You playing with that a little bit? Mm-hmm. Good, I'm going to take a drink of water. Something I was going to do in a break. No.
The fence instantly makes things, gives a focal point
What does?
in a landscape event.
Yeah. Because you can see like your wet washes, and we'll play with this as we go along. Your backgrounds, everything's blending together, and then as you come forward, you want the details are going to be sharper. So realizing when it needs to be wet, when it needs to be dry. I did these little practices the other day, but very wet, and I didn't like this paper too much, but very wet up here, and then I lifted some. See how I just did a wash and then I lifted. to get the
When you
clouds.
say lifting, you're using a dry brush?
No,
No,
that's that damp, clean brush that lifts.
okay.
But it has to be damp to absorb the water. If it's dry, it's not gonna do the same thing. But then down here, I just did some little marks that make it look like it's closer. See how they're sharper? So it was dry then. This is all wet, but then this was dry where the edge was, and I just kind of did little things that kind of look like trees. You don't have to spell it all out. Because if I step back, you can see these little marks with a brush. They look like trees. We read them that way. Look at her ribbon candy here. This is so much fun. Oh, isn't that pretty?
What's that other stroke she's using?
She's just going back and forth. She's just kind of like,
The curve,
but not too
no,
much.
this curve thing here.
Wait, this one?
Oh, there's lower than that.
Oh wait, I want to show this. This one right here. Okay, okay.
The, what stroke is that?
Can you show us that stroke?
Which stroke?
This one. I think she just went. Jesse, it's not as easy as it looks.
Everything else.
I did on the next one. It's just
Huh?
up a little bit and then
Over. Oh, I see you twisted and went down.
Well, it's like starting thin, going straight across and then back down, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
then you have
Here, I'll do it here on this.
of course when I'm doing this at the end.
So she's using the wedge.
But I have the idea.
Yeah, she uses the wedge of the brush, then drags it across where it's thick, and then
Curves
wedge
it
back down. Don't even have to curve it, I don't think.
Oh, really?
Let me try to. Straight. Whoops, I didn't start straight. Straight, curve. It's just a drag. You're just dragging the fat part here, and then you're going back to the
down.
thin.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I like it.
that's a nice stroke.
And it's a nice stretch.
So when does the pollen stop?
I don't know. I don't think it does. I think it's
After the first frost.
Oh, no.
That's all right.
No, no, wait.
Beginning of June, I go to Maine. Guess what I'm going to hit? Pollen season.
I've never had this before.
I had an infection this year for the first time in my life. And because a sinus infection.
That's what I got.
Yeah,
It's not
and it didn't
sinuses.
hurt. It went into my lungs. So I don't know.
Ugh.
Makes you gag.
Yeah, yours is pollen. You can tell. Remember when COVID was rampant and we were all like, I have to cough because of pollen, but people are going to think I have COVID.
Get it out.
This is allergies.
And they're like, sure.
I'm not sick.
All right. Get my right brush here. Oh, good. Get paint on my handle. Deep breath. Now let's play with our round brush. My eye is getting. So, first thing, we want to get a couple of puddles of a good amount of paint. Look on my palette how my colors are running into each other, and I haven't even done anything. They'll do that. Makes you wonder about the whole physics of it, how some pigments are pulling the other pigments, and of course the water plays into that too. But why not? Going back to that green. So I pull a good amount out. I have some particles in here because I let it dry out. So I'm going to gently work those particles to try to dissolve them. Clean my brush thoroughly. Pick up. I'm
going with burnt sienna. I have no idea why. This is a very particled paint.
The earth tones always are.
Yep,
aren't
they are. I have recently found a way, because sometimes after years of your paint sitting in your palette, they get very dry and very particly. Particly? Practically. Because I make my own pastels sometimes, is I've learned by adding a little gum arabic or a gum tragacanth in a gel form, and you just drop some on that. Then when you go back and work into them, it doesn't rehydrate them. It recovers their viscosity, their ability to flow nicely. And you don't need much. All right, brush strokes. All right, that's my word, all right, before I get thing. I had to go through my YouTube videos and take the all right out, take the all right out, take the all right out. I was like, all right.
It's harder than it looks, isn't it?
Now I listen to people, and when they like it, it's just the ums just start to drive me.
It used to be, you know.
They're less
Like-
noticeable in a live setting. Like, I don't know.
We
recognize you
don't
saying
know
all
so
right,
much. Yeah,
but maybe in a YouTube video, I might notice it.
I notice
Yeah.
because as I'm editing along, and there's one lady, she's really good at pastels. But she talks like this, so when she's talking, I can get like 4 minutes in and I'm like, I can't listen to you anymore. So that's one of the first things when I started making mine, I listened to other people and what's important and how it's presented. I'm like, drop and soften the voice. Number one. And people will listen to you longer. All right, I'm loading my brush at the tip. It's pretty wet. We've already talked about wetness. Got a lot in there. If I look carefully at the tip of my brush, it's a little thick. It's not super, super fine point because it's holding a lot of paint right now. So by staying right up on the tip of this, you can get a very thin, shaky line if you've had a good amount of coffee this morning. How do you unshake the line? You do it quickly. You know, if you try to go really slowly, you're going to be inconsistent. If you need a line, I often will draw in the air a little bit like this, and then go, all right, just the very tip, lay it down, boom.
That works. That
Nice,
helps.
clean, right?
Yeah, it does help.
Be deliberative. Just get it down there. Practice it a little bit ahead of time. Now, how versatile are we? We start up on our tip. Notice I'm holding back on the brush, so it gives me a lot of leverage here. I'm not holding it like a pen, again, because it makes it tight and not loose. So I'm back on the brush, on my tip, and I'm going to drag and then press it down and then drag it again, kind of like I did with the wash brush. And you can practice these strokes. We talked a little bit about this last week. It's funny, right now as I lift up, I'm getting this leafy split. See how it's kind of breaking up here? That could work really nicely for, and that's why if I'm painting, I always have a scrap piece of paper over here. So I practice that stroke until I get it the way I want it to be before I come over to my painting, and I've got something on there.
Are you using two colors there or one?
This is just one color. But this brush is not coming to a point, which is frustrating me. Wonder if this one would. These brushes, and I cannot find these again. I used to buy these for my students. They were like $5. It's a Mao, and I've searched for this and I can't find it. And it's a wonderful little brush. I mean, I can get a fine point. It does exactly what I want it to do. I'm a little disappointed in the one I was just using. Whoops. I drag and press and drag. It comes back to that point. See how the other one would separate as I lifted it, where this one doesn't separate.
Huh.
I don't know why. This one cost a lot more than this one did. Oh, those are mine. Thank you. Sure. Wouldn't have let you go on the one, so I won't forget.
So this was that silver brush, but that's kind of cool too. It looks like a type of leaf. Where this one went better along, and it will come back to a point as I'm using it. How are your brushes doing?
These are Walmart special since I lost my one, but so like, yeah. Oh, I see what you're doing. One on each side. Cool.
So it's a lift. I'm on the tip. I press down, and then I lift it again. And then depending on how, again, it's not my flow, my viscosity is not working well. I'm going to add a little more water. You can get different types of leaves by dragging it longer and pulling it longer, or just by dragging, pressing, and then lifting up. You'll get a fatter mark. So by practicing those different things, and a lot is kind of a drag at the tip, press, and then drag back up to the tip.
That lifting off is the hard part.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you're saying drag,
Press.
again.
And drag up to that tip again. Yeah. Maybe you don't lift quite so fast. It's easy when you're watching somebody else do it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is a
share.
Yeah.
I bought a stack of mats from Amazon. I think it was about $12, and the stack is this high, and it's all different colors.
Oh, cool.
And so,
You get your paper the right size. Boom.
well, yeah, I cut it down.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
What a,
Excellent.
What a difference.
Andy, can I just share? These are great to do. If you want to, you have something like this and you're going to give it little gifts or something, you want to have the outline of your paper just about right, the paper you're painting on. Don't do it on the front. Turn the mat over and very carefully. You can draw a very light line, right? And don't touch the bevel of the mat. You want it, but then you get the perfect size to put in those. Amazon also has some of those with backing and, did that come with backing or just the mat? Just the mat.
Backing.
There's one box that I bought. It has the mat, the backing to put behind it, and a plastic bag to put it in. And it was all one little kit.
Wow.
It's kind of neat.
I'll buy that next time. How do you get the color from pulling at the end of the leaf?
Yeah, that's what I'm having
Yeah,
difficulty
one of my
with.
questions is why would you want to do that?
Why would you not want it to pull?
Yeah, why?
okay.
Because it adds interest in it. It looks more like watercolor if it's uneven. I see what you're saying, but maybe there's a shadow there, or how
So you
much
can't-
paint is in the brush and how long it's going to last in that stroke is that balance. I don't know what the trick is to that. I give up on it. I just go, well, it's going to do its own thing. I don't have many of mine that are consistent. There's usually it indicates that there's a shadow of some sort. So you don't have to make two strokes. Let's see, what else can we do with this? We can try, twisting. You can do a whole, I'm tapping to try to get a point here.
Do you do two colors with the, like you, on the front
It's not
brushes?
really double loading. You can a little bit, but I think I have two colors in here now. But I can do a little, I don't know if you can see, a little stroke here, kind of a little press, Here I'm going to do a little twisting up on the tip, bring it around, twist it around, lift up there. I don't know why I did that. Anyway, that didn't come out very well. Let me try it again.
Bring it around, lift it up. Not great, but just those little twists and turns and you have little birds.
How cute.
Oh, I need birds.
I see.
So it's going to show the beak. I can't do it upside down. The beak is just a tiny, tiny drag and a press, tiny drag and a press. The head, I kind of come this way, bring it around, twist that brush up that way. That didn't come out well because I'm in the air, so there's not. But yeah, so you can do.
I see that again. He went by so fast.
That's hard. My little bird.
So you do a little.
Oh yeah. So it's just if I have my hand down, I can do it. A little press, little drag press. Think. This is where I have to think. Head, bring it around, press down, lift it up.
Sweet, as they say.
Look at that blue in there, how that sun makes.
Wait.
She wants to sing that
You want me to
work
do?
that way.
How are we on
Me too, I want to
time?
show us.
It's 11:31.
31.
We wanna see the birds over there
Press.
too.
Lift up. Fine. Oops, I got too fat down there.
Can you show us the technique?
Yeah.
Oh, look, cute.
So, just a little
Looks like a
press.
fish.
Go with the flow.
Down, press it
It's a
down.
fish with legs.
Kind of prehistoric. Cute. You know, and then later when it's dry, you can add an eye, but right now it'll just, if I
Yeah,
add an eye,
blur.
it's just gonna, because it's too wet. Did you see? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Now, I asked you what time and I totally didn't listen.
11:31.
Let's practice some strokes so you can go home and do stuff. What do I need to do? I need to sketch brush and pen, sketchbook, amount of water, brush strokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, never mind.
I want to see. Very good stuff. Very first ones. Those are great. Need a very light hand for the beak, right?
Yeah.
Staying way up on the tips of those bristles. Oh, I wanted to show you this too before I go into other strokes. We'll be going into strokes. You can practice flowers and things. This brush was lent to me. I think lent. She might have given it to me. I know she's always giving me stuff. Another private student I have. And it is a chiseled brush. See how it's kind of chiseled on one side?
Yeah.
And it's especially for making certain types of strokes. So you can do some of the things we've just been doing, but instead of pressing and dragging and worrying all about that, it does it in one stroke. You just get some paint on this thing. You press it the wedgy side down. The wedgy side down. And you don't have to do any press and drag. It just does it in one stroke.
Yes.
So all I've done is just kind of pressed it down.
Oh, yes.
Instead of a drag and press. If you really are going to get into
the stroke? Right here.
these are
Press. Oh, okay, just a press.
just press down. I mean, you can do the same thing with our round brush.
Yeah, but that one makes it quicker.
But
and
this is
easier.
quicker and easier, but it's very distinctive size, distinctive, you know, then it almost starts looking the same all over, which would be one of my concerns about using it too much.
I'm not sure how many of these I sent out. Did I send out this one to you?
Yes.
Where's mine? All right, was there somebody who didn't have a printer?
I don't have a printer, but I picked 2 of these up. So.
Oh, I didn't see that one. That one's in color.
Oh, wow.
This one's in black and white. Okay, thanks.
Oh, I don't, if you have, well.
Anyone want one of these?
Yes, please.
No, she said, well, I didn't get that.
Yes, turn around and get one.
You what?
I've
I know,
printed
you're, I know,
these.
she said
Yes,
she,
good. That's this one.
she didn't have a printer, but she got this, so I don't know.
No, it's supposed to.
Where did this come from?
It's just this is black and white.
Got it. Okay.
I had printed those up. You picked one up
Yeah.
earlier?
Yeah, but I picked,
Oh,
I didn't see it.
Somehow I'm missing
I
some of
missed
your.
that too.
I don't,
PDFs
I only
and-
brought, because a couple people last week said they don't have a printer.
Oh, okay, but somehow I'm missing them on whatever you're sending.
Yeah,
Because
I
I have a
did that
printer.
one.
and
You know, one-
not-
One
need-
email had the
I'm not seeing
attachment
them.
and one didn't.
Okay, so I may not have, this is why I need to write this down so I remember to send it to
I
you.
may not.
So the flowers, you all want this one?
No. I think everyone has that one, but the one with the.
Flowers.
Anyone not have this one? Or you got it in, no, these are mine, I'm sorry.
And then
I have it in black and white.
I have no
Okay.
idea what I've gotten. I'm being perfectly
So the one with the flower and the birds, you guys are set
Yeah.
on that. That's on one sheet. Then I have the real flowers.
Yeah, the real flowers I didn't get.
Okay, I'm gonna write that
Extra one
down.
of these if
Real
somebody needs it.
flowers. And I'm not sure I sent out the real trees yet.
No.
Okay. I will send those out this week, okay?
So the, I don't.
I do have, because you know what, yesterday, I've been house sitting 2 houses, I drove across town, I went, and as I'm printing up at my house, my ink ran out.
Oh, okay. So this.
Go
you-
figure.
You
It
did
didn't-
send this out, I'm sorry. I don't have that one.
I
I
don't
don't have
think,
that.
I'm gonna send,
I think she just brought some in and.
I just brought some in.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's I haven't had any.
So I have black and white of this right now, if you don't have this for right now, because I want to work on this page. Anybody want? Nobody wants, okay. And the birds. Here's some.
I do.
Hey, speak up, lady. And black and white is good because then you can invent your colors. Here's some trees. I haven't talked much about tree shapes, but trees do have very distinctive shapes. These are some extra prints if anybody wants. I will be sending these out, so if you have a printer
I
at
have a
home.
printer.
Okay, but I don't want to keep these either, so. Well, I'll put some in the middle of the table so you guys can.
Yeah, I can print it right over.
I'll take one of those.
Even though the colors are off. But be aware of the different types of trees and what kind of strokes you can make, like the willow, you want these press and then drag and lift down, right, to get a willow. And I'll do some of these as examples. How would you do a maple? How do you do the fir trees?
This is an embarrassing question
No,
to
no.
ask in the middle of class, but can one do this with acrylics as well? If one is using acrylics and not watercolors, would it work?
These are just images that you can use for whatever.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Will the brush strokes work the same way?
Acrylic is interesting because you can thin down your acrylics with water or with a medium, a gel medium, and you can use it as a watercolor, especially in its lower levels, and a lot of people do that. And then you can build up with acrylics and make it thicker and thicker, of course.
Okay.
All of these things, color, the strokes, everything. The stroke is just the brush, it's not the paint you're using. You can do the same thing with oil paints.
Interesting. Okay. Sorry, I'm just.
No, it's a good question. So, I think last week some people started a little bit of this, right? Now you have some ideas on some of these strokes, which ones you would use to create these images. I'm gonna.
You showed those strokes last week?
I think so. I think I showed it.
Oh, man, I must have blanked out.
There is so
I
much.
don't remember that either.
I'm sorry, ladies. I have 4 weeks to throw at you,
Okay.
and I'm trying to keep it sequential and fairly focused so you can go away. And that's why sometimes with the videos, this is not a great video, but it can help remind you of things as well.
So it might be on the video, those strokes.
Well, we've been working on strokes. Which strokes would you use to make this bamboo out of the strokes on your paper right there?
Okay.
You
All right.
didn't get a picture? It's right there.
Yeah, I have it. I'm just saying, I'm trying to determine which strokes. Okay, so these are strokes we've already gone over,
Yeah.
in other words. Okay.
Let's see if there's any strokes on here we haven't used. I'm going to try the bamboo. Great. So first thing we do, we dampen our brush. We make sure we have a good amount of some sort of paint to pool from. We can either lighten it or deepen it. Here I want it fairly thick, so I'm not going to add too much water to this. I want a nice strong color. Notice how I'm pulling some of that blue in? It's because this green is straight out of the tube green, and it's too green for me. So I'm going to bring in a little of that blue and a little sienna. Just why not? Check my brush. It looks like it's got a good load of paint in it, and it's even. So now I think the bamboo. So the stem is going to be a press, kind of lift, press, and then as a break, because bamboo has those joints that they break. Then a little press, a very light press, lift, press, lift, press. So that's kind of the stem. It's not great, but it's okay. Now the brush, the leaves, I'm going to use my strokes to do the leaves, and it's going to be a press and drag, which we practiced before. So I'm going to press and drag, press and drag, and I'm not doing a great leaf here. Ah!
So,
There we go. So I'm getting some press and drag strokes there, just kind of indicating leaves. So just press it and drag it up. Drag and lift, drag and lift. So press, drag and lift. So you get to practice these strokes. Yeah, nice. Very nice. Ooh, very nice. Fun, huh?
Yeah. I never did that before.
And I'm using some of these calligraphy paintings because this is traditional with these type of paintings, learning these brush strokes and applying them. And once you apply it to images like this, then you can use it anywhere. If you want to go on, the bamboo is probably the easiest. And then that single iris is probably the next one. And you might want to turn your paper to get that done. Yeah. Nice.
Yay.
Thank you. Oh, nice flowers. Kid, you're getting there, dear. Very much. Yeah, now bigger. It's wonderful. It's
when you say bigger, what do you mean? Just the whole thing bigger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you practice some of these strokes, because our paper is getting a little restrictive here. Remember, if you can, back off on your brush, hold it further up on the handle so it's not tight. Think ahead of time. Do a couple strokes in the air. I'm going to do this iris, and I want the central stem because that's going to anchor my image, is that stem. And I want it thin and long, so I want to stay way up on my brush and make it long with just a single stroke. Remember how if we do it too slowly, it's going to get jaggedy? So if you practice it in the air a couple of times and then bring down just the tip on the paper, you should get a nice thin stroke that's even.
How do you get that break in the stem of the bamboo? You just take the yeah.
So it's I kind of pressed and then drag and then stop. Press and drag.
I see. Okay.
So that,
And you could also, I'm guessing, do a long line and then go in and go boom, boom after it dries a little bit. You know what I mean?
could, but that paint that you're booming is going to go somewhere.
The booming technique is not desirable.
I mean, let's try it. If we do it wrong. Oops, sorry. Yeah, go ahead and see. It's going to drag it into the next.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of interesting.
Yes.
It looks like thorns now. So now we're just going to drag it out.
And you've got thorns. Okay.
Then, let's see, petals, a little dry. Remember, if it's a little dry, add a touch of water. Do you see touch? Think about the stroke you need to use. It's long, drag, press, and then a short drag and lift. And you learn a little bit how to press and almost twist the brush a little bit if you have to when you're lifting. If you need a fat end to your leaf or if you need a very long, thin tip to your leaf. Think about how you're going to do that. And this is what we end up with, is pages and pages of brush strokes. But that's
Great bookmarks.
great bookmarks. But that's what we do. As I said, in Asia, I remember hearing stories that they would spend 10 years just learning how to grind their sumi ink correctly. 10 freaking years. Then how many on the brush strokes? And then these people, they get these giant sheets of rice paper, and you see a master with a brush that's like this big, and he soaks it with the ink, and he just down a bit, and he's got a flower garden or something, you know.
It's a little bit of Tai Chi in it.
Tai Chi, exactly. And they involve the whole body.
This bamboo is hard. It's a good technique practice.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's trickier than it looked. At first it looks very simple. How to make something look simple that actually takes a lot of concentration, a lot of practice.
So how do you decide, thank you, how do you decide if you wanna go like from
Yeah, whatever,
thin
whichever you
to
want.
thick, or oops, that's not a good
I
one.
understand
Or
what
if
you're
you,
saying.
yeah, or thick to thinner.
This one, I would probably start out, because I'm at that point right now. I'm going to grab my other brush. So, you get some paint. Wow, this is drying so quickly in here. I'm going to turn my paper so that this I came this way and pressed down
Down,
and
right.
then lift.
Oh, okay.
But this other one, for the petals, I think I'm going to start out with a press. I hope this works. Drag and lift toward the center.
Yeah, that's what those are supposed to be. I started wider and then came in and these thinner and went out.
Whoops.
Yeah.
See that? I lost that.
So
Got
the
it.
iris for the petals, it looks like there are two colors in there. So would that have been done with something like that?
No, it's just, you get two colors in your paintbrush and it,
Okay.
so. Yeah. Like right now you have a little red in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you pulled
Oh,
some of
and then
that,
I
and
just
pulled in
put
some
it-
of the blue, or into the
Okay.
brush. This was with one brush stroke, so it's not two brush strokes. Here I've got a couple different colors in there. You can almost see that's horrible work there, but this is not working for me the way I want it to.
See, it's
So I just had a horrible mess on it. This is not that flower anymore, I'm just practicing strokes. But if I press this down, I can also just kind of come around, round that off
Oh, yes,
and let it.
make it bigger.
Can you just, like, okay, these just don't have the same effect as this, so what am I doing?
You're just not pressing enough when you're pressing. So that first point needs to press down a little more. This brush is not gonna do it.
Oh,
Yeah,
So hold it right
it's
in
a-
place and almost press straight down on it. And then drag it up. And I already see my that was messed up. So if it messes up, I'll just take this
None of it's
while it's
easy
still wet
for
and
some of
blend
us.
it together to smooth it out a little more.
Got it, okay.
Takes where if I grab this other wedge brush, I can just go right around here and make these. Look at that! Oh, that's so much fun. But then you're not learning any techniques with it. You're
Right.
just, you're just using a tool for yourself. And they'll all be the same size and all the same shape.
And look completely natural.
If you want it to look mechanical. But you could blend it in with some of the other natural strokes.
Question.
And if it's not working, switch it up.
A
Right.
question.
And most of these are working really well.
So when I'm copying,
Which is what we're doing this.
right, how do I put my signature on it and say, this is my work, even though I copied that?
If I'm copying from someone, I will go, taken from, because it's not gonna be an exact copy, but
Or I'll do
like
inspired by sometimes.
inspired by
But like
somebody.
this, I didn't make that up.
No, and that's why I use my own pictures, my own sketches and stuff like that for things. But this, I mean, this was on the internet and I grabbed it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'm
understand
doing
it.
a lot off the internet and then I get concerned whether I'm gonna.
Copyright infringement.
Some of them are in the
Well-
public domain, but it's hard to tell.
It's
That's
it's not
true,
even just
yeah.
like when people would say to me, "Do you mind if I take a picture of my sculpture?"
Yep.
I'd say no because I think that everybody's just going to come out different anyway. And
Right, I mean,
but
but
this I really
there are
copied
some
this.
people who can almost copy.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who he's a president of some pastel society or group off in the West. She has tracked him down, emailed him, and asked him not to copy her work and pass it off as his original work.
Woof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he promised and he wouldn't do it, and then he kept
He did it.
doing it. So that's a trick. I mean, if it's a very recognizable style, if it's changed significantly, that makes it more yours.
So I should like keep on with this picture, but add other things in it. that-
You could, again, yeah, is it public domain or is it not, and that gets
Yeah,
kind of
I
tricky.
think
Well,
this
it's
is
not
the
the legal
hardest
stuff, it's
challenge
just-
right there.
Sometimes they
You know,
don't
I
like it.
I guess
Right.
it's how do you come up with your own composition too?
Well, who was it? Wasn't it Picasso that said nothing's original, everything's stolen?
Yeah, there's nothing original
Yeah.
under the sun.
But not, if we don't copy, but we get ideas and we glean
Yeah.
ideas from other people. I mean, if I'm
Carolyn?
teaching, I can't.
What's the technique that's used for the bottom right photo of these tulips?
This is
Um,
almost pure pressing in, like a twist.
It's got two colors in it.
Yeah, so we grab a brush, this one. We get a couple,
They've got pink and yellow.
oh, those are bleeding. So that is, can you see this okay, a little bit?
Uh-huh.
Right in this, or I'll try to go up here. So they've taken some yellow, needs to be wetter, because it's gonna bleed. So for it to bleed into the other color, I need it fairly wet. And it's just kind of laying down, you start with a lighter color, kind of twist, see how I'm twisting that for those petals?
Yeah,
And then I get my red, bring it in there. And then I don't have very much of the red. I should have gotten more of the red. But then it's gonna, while it's still wet, it's gonna bleed and you're gonna create that look. That's what she's got going on there.
got it.
Same with the leaves. She's done like that secondary leaf. it looks like it was
Yes.
painted with yellow and then
Mhm.
dropped in that blue-green on both ends of it.
And when you're bleeding, you start with the